Welcome to Net Zero Talent Talks, the podcast where we explore how to build the teams driving the clean energy transition. I'm your host, Lindsay Warren, founder of Net Zero Evolution and a lifelong recruiter obsessed with solving the talent puzzle in clean tech. Each episode, I'm joined by inspiring leaders from EV charging, battery storage, renewables, hydrogen and sustainability, and we dig into what's working, what's not, and how to future-proof your hiring. If you care about people, planet and performance, you're in the right place. Hi everybody and welcome to the first episode of Net Zero Talent Talks, the new LinkedIn Live series where we're going to dig into the real workforce challenges facing the sectors that drive us toward net zero. I'm your host, Lindsay Warren. I'm really excited to be kicking things off with today's topic, the skills shortage. Now, it isn't just coming, it's already here, but this is not going to be a doom and gloom session. It's a conversation about what's really going on beneath the surface and what we can all do differently if we're serious about solving the workforce crisis in sectors like EV charging, energy storage, and electrification as a whole. So joining me is someone who brings a serious amount of credibility and insight to this topic, Dr. Ben Silverstone from Warwick University. Ben's work spans everything from future skills forecasting to policy development, working with industry, education, local authorities and government bodies. Hi Ben, thanks for joining us.
Hi Lindsay, it's great to be here.
So Ben, let's start right at the top then. So when we talk about a skills shortage, what do you think people think it means and what does it actually mean to you?
Yeah, so I think skills gap and skills shortage is used, shorthand for a whole variety of different things. And I think then it becomes harder to understand what it actually means. And the way that I'm looking at it at the moment is we've got two aspects to it. We've got what I like to think of as the more of the same issue and the something different issue. So more of the same is all about those capabilities or skills that are in demand that we already know how to do. So, electricians, welding, plumbing, all of these kinds of really core capabilities that we need, they don't require us to do anything new. They don't need new skills necessarily. What they need is we just need more of them. We don't have enough to fill demand. And that's about capacity. So whether that's about interest in the jobs, whether it's about incentives to train, spaces to train, there's a whole variety of different issues that impact on that. But that's capacity, and that is a set of issues that needs to be looked at. On the other hand, then you've got something new. This is about the new things that are emerging, the new skills that we need to develop as an economy in order to meet these demands, and they require something different. They're not about just simply making sure that we've got spaces to train. They're about, first off, understanding those capabilities, making sure that we're able to develop them, domestically, that we're then able to train people domestically, and that they are right for the kinds of roles in the right place at the right time. So they're two separate things, and I think if we're really going to get serious, and businesses are going to get serious about looking at this challenge, they really need to separate those two challenges out for themselves as a first step, because that's really going to help.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. And I think certainly the capacity issue, if we use an example that I stumble across from time to time, the on-street charging sector right, requires people to go out and install a large number of charge points in any one particular project time. But those technicians that are doing that work are already busy somewhere else doing other things, and there just isn't the right amount of people within the sector to come and carry out that work. So there are people with the capability, but naturally there just aren't enough people right now that can do that.
Yeah.
What are you seeing then in your day-to-day work in terms of that trying to be improved and for that capacity issue to become less of a challenge in future years?
Yeah, there are lots and lots of different things that can be done. I think a really nice way of thinking about it is it's a bit like an iceberg. We see that capacity issue, having the right person to sign off that a job has been done safely is kind of like that's above the surface. And then there's all the stuff that happens underneath that impacts on that particular issue. So if we take what you're talking about there, the getting the skilled electricians on site at the right time to do the bit they need to do. If we roll it right back, there's only one route in the UK to becoming an electrician. You have to do an apprenticeship, which in itself builds in capacity issues. Yeah, you can only get so many through at any given time. There's then challenges of incentivizing employers to take on apprentices and all these different things. And one area that we're sort of starting to take a lead from is, well, you can use the health sector as a really good example. So if you imagine, your fully qualified, experienced electrician is a brain surgeon. Yeah, I've got a headache. I don't need to go and see the brain surgeon straight away. The health service provides me with a whole range of different people I can go and see. I can see a nurse. I can see someone at my local pharmacy. There's a whole series of different levels of activity that go on beneath that. And we have seen that in the use of competent persons. To fit a smart meter, these guys aren't fully qualified electricians. They are competent in a set of activities to do a specific job. And I think maybe we need to expand that more. We need to stop thinking in order to fit all of my charge point infrastructure. I don't need a whole team of brain surgeons. I need the right. What I need to look at is what capabilities do I need to do this job, and at what point do I need people with higher level skills and higher level competencies to sign things off or make things safe or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And then be more strategic, because it's not to say that competent persons roles are not skilled and they're not valuable. They are. These guys who are fitting smart meters are now coming out fitting domestic charge points, aren't they? They're the same guys. They can come out, they can do it, and we can do a lot more of them because it's more straightforward and there are different routes to training these guys. So that is one way of sort of really starting to expand this, the way that we look at it. It's about looking at things differently.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. And I think that it goes right back then to job design, doesn't it? Rather than actually thinking about, right, we need somebody that can do every single aspect of this particular job in all areas. If there's a team of 8, perhaps only 2 of them might need to be that really fully qualified brain surgeon type level that you're talking about. And the other 6 could perhaps pick up other roles that mean the projects get delivered on time, but without having to go out and find those specific 8 people. And actually, for businesses and for the people that are listening, that's a cost saving to their business as well, quite often.
Massively. And they're also, as the demands evolve, then these people can be reskilled more ready. Like I say, from fitting smart meters to fitting charge points, it's not a huge shift. Mm-hmm. But these individuals can be reskilled, to do this. And you're right, job design has a massive role to play in this. And we are not good at it. And we're not. We don't think about what capabilities we want people to have. But generally, our first line of thought is, must be qualified in.
Yeah.
Must have this in. And there are instances where that is critical. You need that safety critical sign off for something. You have to have someone with the right tickets to do that. That's great. But the rest of the time you don't. And one of the things that I've been quoted as saying, and I'm sure it's going to come back to haunt me one day, is if you can make biscuits, you can make batteries. Okay, so we look at a slightly different context, right? There's a role in battery making called mixing. There are guys who are in battery factories looking after processes that mix the slurries, that coat electrodes. That's what they do. And actually that job has more in common with being a commercial baker than it does with being an engineer. It's the same kinds of competencies. It's about mixtures, it's about amounts, it's volumes, it's temperatures, all the stuff that you want someone who's baking your bread to know about. And if your default position as an employer is to say, in order to fill that role, you must have a level 3 technician, an engineering technician qualification, then you're going to get someone who's a level 3 engineering technician, who probably knows nothing about batteries and has a whole range of capabilities you don't need for that role. Or you could go, if I express this as a series of competencies, maybe I will capture somebody with parallel competency. So if I'm sitting there as, I'm working at the Kipling factory and I'm sitting there looking at this job and it says must have an engineering technician qualification, I'm not going to go anywhere near it. I'm looking at it and it goes, here are the 15 core competencies we're looking for. And I'm going, wow, I can demonstrate that in a different context. And then all that the employer has to do is train me about batteries.
Yeah.
What's easy to train somebody to do? And I think this is where we start to rethink the way that we're operating, because the number of people we're going to need for these kinds of roles far exceeds the number of people coming out of the education system.
Yeah, completely agree. I don't know if anyone can see, we've got a quality vacancies poster up just coincidentally behind me. And one of the things that we really dig into is the person specification. So if we get a new job spec in from a client, it will likely have a list of qualifications and a list of must-haves. But actually, when you dig into that conversation and you ask the question, for what reason is the level 3 engineering technician qualification required? Very often it's, I don't know, it just is. Yeah. And actually, then is there some kind of legal sign-off that must require that person to have that particular qualification? If the answer to that is no, then like you say, let's break this down into competencies and transferable sectors and skills and look more for the core values and the right person that can come in, pick things up and learn them.
So we're tackling this from both ends. I think this is quite important. We're tackling it with employers and saying, start to rethink the way that you're phrasing your jobs. But at the other end, we're tackling it with the education system and saying, wouldn't it be great if, as people came out with qualifications, it actually said what they can do, not just a piece of paper that they've got, or and it was looked at many years ago, but almost like a capability passport, that an individual can accrue over time that talks about their capabilities. Because the other thing as well is the qualifications go off, so you've got, so we talk about engineering technician, you go, on paper this person ticks the box, they've got their engineering technician, they did in 1978, but they've got it. Is that as relevant as somebody who is working in that bakery right now? And that's the kind of the sort of thought process we need to go through.
Yeah, understood. We've got a question from Nick at Chargy. Hope you're well, Nick. He's asking, Ben, how can skills training help people transition from fossil fuel jobs to roles in the growing renewable energy and electrical industries?
Yeah,
I think we're talking specifically oil and gas and diesel roles there.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it is really important because we're seeing it in a lot of different places, and I've been involved with a number of organisations right across the world who are going through that exact change at the moment. And at its most crude, it's about mechanical to electrical. At its most crude, and that's the fundamentals of where we're having to start with a lot of people. So one of the areas that we've worked on as Warwick University is transitioning automotive engineers into the EV world at OEMs, and they're coming on kind of master's level transition courses, and they're missing that real fun. They need to go back and remember what volts and amps and ohms and all this kind of stuff is. It's not saying we're going to throw everything away that they've already got, but it's about that contextual shift in what they're doing. And I don't like the term conversion course, because a conversion suggests that you stop doing something and that you go and do something different.
Yeah, which psychologically is difficult, right, for somebody as well.
It's difficult, and it also inherently suggests that you're going to leave behind everything you already knew or everything that you've already done. And that's not what we're saying. If you've learned about fluid dynamics from a combustion engine environment, your experience and your knowledge is just as valid in battery coolant, for example. And so what we tend to think more about is augmentation or additional. So we're not going to throw away your years of experience as a mechanical engineer. We're going to give you additional in this, and it's about breaking it down. So we're trying not to talk about full qualifications. You might not need to go away and do a full full fat qualification to make that transition. It may be about what are these core areas, and we did it. We did a big piece of work for Ford for their powertrain manufacturing team in this exact context. So we broke it down and we looked at, right, what are the new roles and new teams that these guys are going into, and that went deep into their person spec, the job spec, and all these things, and then also where are these guys coming from, and what are they doing now, and therefore what's the differences, and what are those short, bite-sized bits and pieces they need to get from where they are to where they're going that can be delivered in a sensible amount of time. And what we're saying is, rather than waiting until their role is redundant, let's start that transition now. Start developing people into their new roles and pushing them across. So I'm a huge proponent of looking for skill solutions rather than qualification solutions. People like qualifications, they like tickets, so let's give people opportunities to build towards that. But as an employer, my need is to have somebody who can do something different.
Yeah, totally. And that's a fantastic example there of where it's a private sector business that is supporting the entire industry, really, by helping the transition to take people from the old traditional ICE engines to then developing powertrains. And I think
it is really, really hard. And what I'm finding,
much government support there, Ben, with that, or was it all private for Ford?
Well, government are supporting it. We're seeing, we're starting to see shifts. So what we're hoping is the growth and skills levy. So this is the restructured apprenticeship levy, which will give greater flexibility to those employers that pay into the levy. We're hoping that will give greater flexibility for employers to say, I don't just need to pay for a full-on apprenticeship. I need to pay for these short courses over here, or I need to pay for this over there. We're hoping that's going to give additional flexibility. The devolution of adult skills budgets to particularly mayoral authorities, if businesses happen to be based in those areas, that includes greater flexibility to use funding for the delivery of courses that are specific to employers' needs. But what we have to recognise as well is that maybe this is and this is me putting my slightly harder face to this. These are business decisions. When Halfords came out and said, we feel like we've been left behind, there's no help to train our technicians in this, my initial response was, well, you've seen which way the wind has been blowing for many years. Your business decision was not to do anything about it, and now you've been hit with this thing. So there's got to be a balance, and the balance to me, and maybe this is my socialist leanings coming along, but what we need to do is government needs to put more of its support in underpinning the supply chain, because those are made up of smaller businesses that will find this harder, and less support into the big OEMs who need to be able to absorb this. So if I'm Bob's Exhaust, so I make muffler boxes under the arches in Coventry for Land Rovers, I've really got to rethink what my business is doing. And, I can't rely on the goodwill of my OEM, because if they can't get the parts they need from me, they'll just go somewhere else, won't they? And there's a challenge there. So I think these smaller businesses that are part of the supply chain probably need more support. And talking to government recently, there's how can government invest? How can businesses invest? And we're looking at ways of incentivizing business investment, and the quickest one is to provide tax relief. A business that invests more in its own training pays less tax. It's just quicker and easier, and that can be done. But there's also an incentive around what is the individual's responsibility in this. We're not passive in this process as individuals. Do you know what I mean? And we need to, and there are going to be greater levers that individuals can use to secure themselves better opportunities.
I think that the training at that bigger, more corporate level, just going back to the fact that yes, it's 100% a business decision. Actually, they see it as an investment or a cost up front, very, very immediately, right? But in the long run, the retention of those staff, the loyalty of those staff, and the further projection of the business becoming more future-proof, the costs will balance themselves out. It's a challenge because on a quarterly basis, businesses like that need to report their earnings to the board. And if there's big investment in skills, share price can drop. And it's all that kind of round the boardroom financial aspect that I believe does have a negative impact on businesses like that paying for skills up front and getting that sorted.
I agree with you. And, that saying, Richard Branson said, train them well enough they can lead, but treat them well enough that they don't, is it's something that I always think of. But, I mean, you guys, you work in finding solutions for people with job needs. It costs a lot of money to recruit, doesn't it? It's not a cheap exercise. And, if that falls through and takes a long time, if you're sitting there trying to recruit somebody for a role for a year and you're ending up having to overpay, for somebody who maybe then doesn't actually turn out to be quite what you were looking for. And, surely that's got to be reported.
I mean, we talk about it all the time. We're trying to save some clients some funds, right? If we're talking about a role that's 50k with this very, very niche technical experience, well, actually, you could go out and hire somebody for 38 to 40,000 who can become that 50k candidate in 12 to 18 months simply by investing £4,000 or £5,000 in training. It's a false economy to keep paying over the odds to bring people into businesses.
That's exactly. We need more of that. I mean, my very cheesy adage on this one is, I'm going to go and cook myself a Sunday dinner, and I've got two options here. I can go out to the supermarket and I can buy it all. Buy my meat, my veg. You can do all of that kind of stuff. Or with a bit of forethought, I've grown that veg in my garden. So what I need to go out and shop for is a lot more focused, defined, and I can get that one thing that I need that I haven't grown in my garden, and I've got my Sunday dinner. And that's what we need to, it's about growing your own. And yes, there are, short-term, immediate vacancies that we need to do something about. But if we're thinking a little bit more long-term, this is where apprentices are really valuable. Why don't we can bring in apprentices now that will grow into becoming that person that I need in 3 years' time. I'm not paying through the nose for somebody right now that I'm not going to use enough. I'm developing somebody who's got company loyalty and all that kind of stuff. There's so many really sensible solutions here that we can be looking at. And I think it's, if employers are not seeing those, that's fine. We don't expect employers to see them. What they need to go and do is talk to the people that do see them.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think with that in mind, then, if a business knows it's got a workforce gap coming, what would your advice be to them, and what should you be telling them to do over the next 6 to 12 months? We've touched on a bit of it, but could you just expand on that a bit for us?
Yeah, I think first off is identifying what it is as an organisation they're going to have to do differently. Yeah, so if it is going from, for example, I worked with a foundry in Warsaw, right? They lost 65% of their business overnight because they made turbocharger caps, and there you go, just disappeared overnight. So what is it they need to do differently? Well, they've got a core competency set. They can cast stuff, and they can do that kind of thing. So what could they? So is it about a different product, or is it about a whole different process? So what is it about the business that's going to need to change? And therefore, what are they going to need to do differently? Therefore, what are the people going to need to do differently? But not just what they need to do differently, but what can stay the same. So I had a conversation with a wiring harness, a tier 2 supply chain partner making wiring harnesses. And they were worried about the shift to EV. And we had the conversation, and they're like, well, actually, our core competency of making wiring harnesses stays exactly the same. The product will just change. So maybe we just need some product design experience that's different rather than the core manufacturing stuff. So rather than just thinking this is going to make everything different, let's look at what's different and what needs to stay the same. And then once that's in place, there's lots and lots of sources of information out there. So for example, the UK Foresighting Hub looks at future competencies. So if we take battery manufacturing as an example, so we as Warwick have led on a number of different initiatives there. So we know about future competencies for cell manufacture, for module and pack assembly, for battery recycling. And there's lots and lots of reference material and useful information there that can say, well, if that's the way direction you're moving, this is what the shape of your job roles might be. This is what the shape of the competencies for those job roles might be. This is where the training already exists, and this is where new training needs to come in place, and that kind of stuff. And once there's that deeper understanding of what these roles look like, my final piece of advice, and you don't need to wait until the end, is to start engaging with training providers. So, I mean, we have a policy of come and talk to us about what you need. If it isn't us, in terms of that, that's going to provide it, then we will introduce you to our friends who it is. We're not just going to say, that's not us, go away. We say, right, yeah, that's not us, but our friends over here do this kind of work, and come and talk to them. And the way of thinking about it, to come back to your point of having to report it to the board and financial and all this kind of stuff, is if you need a new widget for your product, you don't just go out and hope somebody's got the widget you want and go and buy it off the internet. You go and talk to your suppliers, don't you? You go to your suppliers, this is what we need, this is the specification, and your suppliers will prototype and work with you to refine the prototype to get to a point where you're going to buy that product from them and it's going to meet your needs. Why don't we do that for skills? Why do we just expect they're going to go and buy it, or that somebody's going to appear with it? So what I'm saying to businesses is treat skills as any other part of your supply chain. Engage with it, prototype it, build those relationships, and you will get what you need. And I guarantee you, what you need as a business is not that unique that nobody else has thought of it. Yes,
fantastic advice, Ben. And I wasn't aware actually of your level of input on a broader scale in terms of anybody that is listening to this that would like to talk to you about the challenges that they've got. Are you comfortable with me sharing your contact details?
Yes, for sure. Come to us. And like I say, if it's not us, that's cool. We will support you to find who it is.
Yeah.
And I think that I think has been missing from the skills system for so long, because it's highly commercialized. Providers will either promise the world and then not deliver, or they'll just say, no, that's not us, we're not interested, go away, and good luck to you, sort of thing. Whereas we operate as part of a wider network, so we go, well, actually it's the right skill set but at a lower level. Here's our FE college friend, or here's another university that does this better.
Yeah, nice. Another question from Nick. So Ben, do you think the UK education system is moving fast enough to provide the knowledge about climate change and support the skills necessary for the transition? So going right back into the education piece, are they doing enough, do you think?
I'm going to say no in some respects. So, I mean, bear with me on this. Again, it's not all doom and gloom, but I think let's be realistic about this, right? If we pop the school system aside for a moment, once you get out of school, the skills and education system is demand-led, all right? So me in a university, if I want to design a new course, one of the first things I have to demonstrate to the university is demand, right? Now, the problem is, once the demand's already there, it's almost too late, because it's going to take me, let's say, conservatively, it takes me 18 months to design and approve a course. I've got to then recruit to it. I've got to put people through it, get my first batch of graduates. So all these lovely graduates coming out of university right now are on courses that were conceived to meet a demand that existed 5 or 6 years ago. At the very best, could be even longer than that. Could be 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And in some areas that doesn't matter. If I'm studying English literature or I'm studying sociology, whatever. But in something like engineering, it's a lot more fast-paced. It doesn't work. So that's an area we've been focusing on, is how do we say better in 5 years' time? I can't tell you how many, but in 5 years' time, I'm going to need people to be able to do something different. And how do we adjust the education system to allow that to happen? That's something that we're kind of exploring at the moment. And the same goes for your your vocational college training. They have the same embargo type issues. Once you put a new course out into that vocational space, those awarding organisations can't do anything to it for a period of time. Things like 2 years, they can't touch it. Well, what can happen in 2 years? Yeah, even T levels that are the new flagship vocational courses from the government. The oldest one of those is now 6 years old and has not been reviewed yet. So there's a lot of work we've done there, and we're starting to see it. I'm really pleased. We're starting to see it with Skills England and with apprenticeships. We're working very, very closely with them and the workforce foresighting to speed up the review of apprenticeships, to speed up those changes so that you can almost on a, not necessarily a rolling basis, but on a much, much shorter schedule, say, this apprenticeship now needs to be tweaked in this way and this way, let's tweak it and continue rolling. When you then back it into the school curriculum, that's where we start to see bigger issues. Our national curriculum is ancient. We're still teaching teenagers how to crack crude oil and stuff like that, and we're not teaching them enough about future technologies. And my partner's a dual biology and physics specialist, so she's a bit of a unicorn in this space. But the GCSE science mark scheme requires young people to say, in order to get full marks, that wind turbines are ugly and unreliable. And what kind of message does that get across? And there's only one lesson. There's only one lesson in the entire secondary school curriculum on alternative propulsion. So they're not learning about this stuff. Now, what we're trying to do is we're trying to change that. So I chair Coventry's Green Skills Initiative, and again, green skills, a little bit like the skills gap, is another almost like misleading thing, because if you ask me, every job's a green job and every skill's a green skill. It just depends on the colour, how deep green it is. What we're looking at trying to do more of is saying, right, okay, in schools, how can we as universities, how can industry support schools better to start to bring this experience in more, so that we're creating greater awareness. Now, young people are much, much more aware of the environment and what we're doing to the earth and all this kind of stuff. And there is medically diagnosed anxiety around climate change. They give training on it in secondary schools, teachers, how to support young people with medically diagnosed climate anxiety. I mean, what the hell does that say about society? But that is going on. I mean, that doesn't scare you as a parent. It bloody should. I've got 4 kids, and it scares the life out of me.
We launched our schools outreach initiative, Net Zero Heroes, to try and get businesses in front of key stage 2, 3 and 4 students to give them some insight into the roles that they can undertake by carrying out the subjects they love, because they're not going to link geography to potentially being a GIS mapper on a utility scale solar farm. Right? They're not going to know that particular lesson is going to enable them to do that. Ben, we've run over time. I don't know if the technology just allows us to carry on, or whether we've been cut off, right? Yes. But I've just got one more question for you, please, mate, just before we go. So, that if we stay on our current course, what will the workforce landscape look like 5 years from now, in your opinion?
Do you want the worst case scenario?
Yeah, and best, I guess. But
the most pessimistic view that I've got of this is that we become a second-class technology country. That's what it'll be. Yeah. We won't get the investment for things like battery manufacturing. We'll lose a lot of our high-value manufacturing because that skill base will go somewhere else. And this isn't about importing those skilled people into this country. That is again a drop in the ocean. This is about raising the aspiration of young people to want to do these things. And as soon as these roles start to disappear off to other economies that have these skills more readily available, then we'll become that second-class economy in this space. And although that's a very, very doom and gloom look at it, it's not what we want to happen, and it's not what the government wants to happen. There's a lot of investment going into developing these skills, but the skills transition is not something that's going to happen to business. Forget that. We're not serving you. This has to be done together. And that isn't putting the onus on business to lead it, to tell us everything. That isn't what I'm saying. We do this together, then we will achieve what we need to achieve.
Good man. Government, education and business all pulling together to make it happen.
Exactly.
Ben, thanks very much. You dropped some real serious insight and challenged a lot of the conventional thinking today. So I really appreciate you being the first guest on the new series. To everyone watching, I hope the session sparked a few ideas, maybe even caused you to rethink how your business approaches the workforce challenge. This is just the start of Net Zero Talent Talks. We're going to run these sessions possibly fortnightly, maybe monthly, but I'll let you all know. And we'll be tackling the big topics around hiring, leadership and workforce development in the race to decarbonise transport and energy. Ben, thank you very much, and I'll see you all soon.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks for tuning in to Net Zero Talent Talks. If you've enjoyed the conversation, make sure you follow the show and share it with someone who cares about building better teams in the green economy. I'm Lindsay Warren, and I'll see you next time for more insight, honesty and practical advice to help you hire for a net zero future.